Happiness isn't a destination, it's a journey. Enjoy the process, do something today that makes you better than yesterday, and enjoy that journey and love it. Hey, what's up guys? Stan here, and this is week 25, book 25, and this week's book is Everything is Fucked by Mark Manson. Now, with this book, I really did enjoy it. It's maybe not as good as The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck in terms of how gripping it is and how much it holds you into the book, but I guess the topic that it talks about I found a lot more relatable. I feel Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is something, it's one of those books where it's either very helpful for you and you need to read it, you don't get it at all, you shouldn't read it, or you already know all of it and it was just affirmation that what you're doing is correct. And I kind of fell into that last camp, so although it was a very good and inspiring book and I got a lot out of it, and it was quite funny obviously, it didn't change me. It just gave me affirmation that what I was doing was right. And so with this book, Everything is Fucked, I realized that it wasn't the same style of book. It wasn't really a self-help book, I guess, as such, but instead it talked about that notion of when we get the things that we want that make us happy, after a certain amount of time, they stop making us as happy as they did. And the best way to explain this is whenever you've gotten a pay rise. So, you might be, on 60 grand a year, let's call it. And if someone goes and gives you $10,000 an extra $10,000 a year and you're being put onto 70, when that first happens, you're going to be ecstatic, right? Like, you're going to be very happy. You've just got an extra, $200 a week. And that happiness is real, and it actually does change the way that you feel for that short period of time. But after a little while, it just becomes the norm now. 70 grand is now your new zero, and you don't get the same happiness every time you get that paycheck. So, what's happening there? Back when you're on 60, you desperately wanted that 10 grand and it would change your life or it would make things change for you. But now that you've got it, it's just normal now. And then someone gives you, let's say you a $20,000 pay rise, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. You're feeling so great. And after a little while longer, it becomes your new zero, and now you don't feel that same happiness anymore. And that goes on and on. And it actually is something that's quite funny, because now every little pay rise you get has to be bigger and bigger to get that same level of satisfaction. 10 grand on top of 60 is way bigger than 10 grand on top of 150. So going from 60 to 70 is not the same as going from 160 to 170. It's, that extra 10 grand when you're already making 160 grand a year is nowhere near as the same. So what does that mean? Well, I think what it does mean is that as humans, we aren't satisfied with staying still. We aren't satisfied with not developing, not growing, not being better than we were yesterday. And that's something that I always go back to. But I think it's important to understand that we're not going to ever be happy. Happy isn't a destination we can get to. And that if we think we can eventually be happy one day, you're just wrong. You're going to get there, and then after a while it's going to become normal, and then you're going to forget how happy you were. And you see that with much more than just money. You look at it now with the anti-vaxxers and vaccinations, right? 50, 60 years ago, whatever it was, when measles and everything were a lot more widespread, and polio and things like that, we wanted to eradicate this somehow. And we were unhappy that we didn't, and then we solved it, and then decades down the track, people forgot, people got used to it, people started going against vaccinations, and the anti-vaxxer movement started, and look where we are now. So that's a pretty extreme case, but that's the same way that things work. And then even in our life, you might finally get your dream job and you're like, yeah, this is amazing, I'm doing this, this, and this. And then after a while, it just becomes any other job. You still got to go in every day, still got to do the same old stuff every day. And so you need to constantly grow and constantly develop. And in your career, when you have a great leader, you notice that that your great leader, why they're so great, is they're constantly teaching and pushing you and developing you. If you talk to a lot of the people that have followed me around for years, I'm not an easy boss to work for. I push you as hard as I can. I will constantly give you tasks that you probably can't complete, or you probably can't do to the level that you think is required. But I make those calculated risks knowing that what's the worst that can happen? Can you burn the hotel down? Can you completely destroy the business? No. So why don't you take a crack at it, learn and develop and strive through it? And, although I'm a pretty hard boss and I give people pretty demanding tasks like that, I've had a lot of people follow me around the country and the world, wanting to continue to work for me. And, I've talked about this before. In my last hotel, I had people from just about every other job that I ever had working at that hotel because obviously the leader that I was is something that they could deal with, or they could live with, or they enjoyed. So my point of that story is that happiness isn't something you find. It's a journey that you're on. You're going to need to constantly progress. You need to constantly be learning and developing. And that doesn't always have to be around your career, like I've talked about in this video. It can just be about anything. Just do stuff. Don't just sit there doing the same old thing every day. You are going to be unhappy. Change what you do. Change the people that you're around. I've talked to a lot of people recently that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I'm not sure who said this, but it's true. It's completely true. If you are hanging around with the same 5 people all the time, then you become the average of those 5 people, and you don't grow and develop any further if they aren't either, and their 5 people are always staying the same. You need to constantly find other people, and that does mean that you'll spend less time with people that you're really close with, but it doesn't mean you have to kick them out of your lives. It just means meet new people, learn new things. If you think you're stuck in a rut somewhere and that you don't know any way out of it, or maybe you grew up in a society that is, quite low socially, don't have a lot of money, or, in quite a bad neighborhood or whatever, one of the good ways to do that, I'm not speaking from a place of privilege here. I come from Manarewa in South Auckland. It's one of the, the toughest parts of Auckland to come from, in terms of economic opportunities, the quality of the schools, and things like that. So it's a tough neighborhood, but I took myself out of there. I think the best thing I ever did was move to Australia and just kept on traveling and moving and meeting all these new and wonderful and amazing people, and who changed and sculpted me as I went along throughout the years. So if that is you and you come from one of these places and you want to find a way out of that, or at least you want to find a way of learning some new things to take back to that environment and help others, then you need to explore, you need to grow, and you need to develop. Go meet new people. Be open and honest with them and meet them. I think that's huge. And I think if you're able to do that, it shows a lot of strength of your character as well. I've kind of gone a bit all over the place here with this one, but it did make me think a lot, this book. It made me thought a lot about my life, where I'm going, how I can ensure that I'm always happy and doing things that make me happy, and understanding that happy isn't a destination. I'm not going to get there one day and stay there, that it's a journey, and that I need to love the journey. I need to love the process. I need to be doing things every day that push me a little bit, that scare me, that drive me to be a better person, and just not just money or whatever, but just in every aspects of my life. I need to also be learning about things that have nothing to do with anything that I'm doing, science or math or arts or whatever it is. Don't just stick to the little small worldview that I have. I need to expand that, look outside, make sure that I'm taking in as much knowledge as possible. So that's it. Leave it there. That's my takeaway. Happiness isn't a destination, it's a journey. Enjoy the process. Do something today that makes you better than yesterday, and enjoy that journey and love it, because it is what it is. That's what life is. It's a journey. It's not a destination. You can't get somewhere and just plug in and be happy, right? So we'll leave it there. So next week we've got Tribes by Seth Godin. This is the first book I read by Seth, and you know, well, you'll see with the next videos, I've read a whole bunch of his afterwards. So really, obviously enjoyed it. Can't wait to get into it. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.